o'clock. So we draw a line, and you draw a line, that means that the RGL is 45.99s. And that's it. There is only a single price, 45.99. It's buy side above, sell side below narrative. But obviously, if you draw it as an area, then of course that's a different answer, isn't it? 45.99 or 98.75 as it turns out to be. So if we draw it as an area, then of course that's a different RGL. So you can see here, for example, this is the London RGL here, and obviously there's the actual RGL there. So it's as wide as I want it to be. It's as wide as I want it to be, isn't it? So it's as narrow as I want it to be. I can have it over that period there, in which case it's going to be very specific to that price, or I can have it over the initial balance area, or I can have it over the pre-market. And obviously, if you have it over the initial balance area, the pre-market, the RGL is still that single price. It's what you include into the RGL that becomes important, how specific into the RGL you want it to go. But the one thing that's always true is, so long as you have the initial balance, the RGL will always be red. Always be red. It doesn't matter what you have, because it's below that RGL price. It has to be red. If it's not red, you're not including the right RGL. You know, if it's not red, this cannot be the right RGL you're using. You know, in which case you're not using the UK Cash Open as your RGL. And you don't need to use the UK Cash Open as your RGL, do you? You could simply use the previous day close from the US session as your RGL. And I'm not here to tell you not to do that, because that's actually what the big board is showing you is yesterday's close. The big board does not show you the London Open, nor will it show you the US Open. But we include it to remind ourselves that there are other elements, And then when we look at the other elements, we obviously always have to include other things. So we have this 9 o'clock RGL here. Well, that 9 o'clock RGL from last night means that this is still red, regardless. But I know that that's the case. I can see it's the case, because obviously this cannot be any other color. If it is, you've done something wrong. You've set it up wrong somehow. So we can obviously understand that it's up to us how many RGLs we want to use, what RGLs to use. It's entirely up to us. There is no right and wrong answer to it. It's just your answer. And that's the type of trades that we have. That's the type of trades that we have on the screens. But we're always reminded whether the big picture is still red as well. And the big picture is based on this RGL here as well. So whilst this RGL is not that RGL, and if it goes above here, it's going to be blue, that's because the price is roughly the same. The RGL of the US here is the same roughly as the RGL of the UK Cash Open. So therefore, it's pretty much definitely the case that if this goes below, that whatever it is we're using will always be red. Always be red, because that's now the actual RGL of the 2 sessions. And because of that, if it's below here, we are predominantly going to be sell side only business. Yeah, sell side only business. So it doesn't make any difference. Before this tool, all you did was draw a line, wasn't it? Before this tool, all you did was draw a line. It's just replacing the need to draw that line, isn't it? That's all it's doing, is replacing the need to draw a line. So there isn't a right and a wrong to it. It's just what you want to know about. Do you want to know what last night's US cash close was? In which case, that might be your only RGL in the entire charts. So when you change your RGLs, all you do is you leave the 9:30 trade on. You leave, sorry, the 9 o'clock trade on. So if I go into the RGL itself and I start looking for the 9 o'clock trade, I'll try and find it. There it is there, and I'll get rid of all the other ones. And I'll just leave the 9 o'clock trade on its own. Then that becomes the RGL now, doesn't it? So all we've got is the US RGL big board. So if this is red, the big board will be red. Yeah? So all I've done now is I've taken off every other RGL, and all I've done is I've left the cash close price. That's all I've left with now, is I've came up with the final cash close price, and that is the big board. But obviously it means that I'm losing all the information from the UK Open. Now, as it transpires, the UK Open is also red, as well as the US Open is now red as well. So the US close is now red as well. So I know that there's a very heavy short sell in this, in the ascendancy at this stage, because everybody is now selling into this. So that's my choice to then have that information available on the screens by adding in the London Open. But so long as I don't just add it in and forget about the fact that the US cash close is also very important to me. Because obviously when we start looking at this and we maybe change the time frame of reference from the 5-minute to the 30-minute, we can start to recognize the color of the big board right through the entire spectrum of things. Now, obviously, as we start to move into these, you can see that because the US cash close is so small a reference point, it doesn't show as an RGL anymore, does it? So that's something you've also got to bear in mind, that when you go up a time frame, if your time frame's too narrow, it's got to span one of these candles. If it doesn't span the candle, it doesn't register. So if I take this down to a 10-minute chart, the RGL still is not registering because it's only a 5-minute RGL. So the only candle that this will show on is a 5-minute candle. And then you look at the 5-minute candle, of course, you now have the ability to look at the fact that the US RGL has been buy side, buy side, buy side, and then it's been sell side today. And if we look in the background, we can see the same type of information. It's buy side through this entire phase, and then it goes sell side in this phase here, sell side in this phase. So, and again, it's you don't have to do it as a 5-minute candle. You can do it as a 10-minute candle. If you can do it as a 30-minute candle, you can do it as 30 minutes. You can do it as a whatever you want to do it as. You can do it as. In other words, it's just about you knowing what your RGL, your own RGL is and what you're trying to show. It doesn't make any difference to anybody else what you're trying to show, but it makes a difference to you. At the end of the day, the RGL should still, for everybody's RGL in terms of the US cash close, they'll all have the same price. So therefore, whether it is or whether it isn't above or below it, it's still going to be above it or below it for everybody. And that's something we know. We don't need an indicator to tell us, but we can obviously add in the likes of the London Open. We can add in, because remember, there's lots of RGLs for them during the day. It could be a high volume candle. It could be a day high, day low candle. It could be a news candle. It could be something else. These are all RGLs. It's just that we're not having to draw them on the screens at any particular time. So when I come into a swing high up here, this is an RGL, whether you like it or whether you don't like it as it transpires. It has a little surge of volume. That's an RGL component in its own right. It has some volume coming into the area. It has a swing high component. It has this idea of what's happening in the US close, etc., etc. So, pre the RGL tool, this is all we had, right? Pre the RGL tool, this is what we had here. And what we said was, right, draw in the RGLs. Draw in your own RGLs. And you'd say, right, it's going to be day high. So I'm going to think about that as a buy side, sell side level. It's got volume. I'm going to think about that as a buy side, sell side level. I'm looking at the London Open, and that's the same price. So I'm going to be thinking about that as a buy side. There's the London Open, right? So there it is. There's your RGL, buy side, sell side level. So what's the problem with that? If the market's below this, it's sell side business. I don't need the tool to tell me this. So obviously what I can then do in that situation there is then I can look at it and say to myself, okay, I like the idea of running a VWAP against the cash open. So when we put in the cash open, we put in the VWAP, we can start looking for VWAP tests. So when we start getting close to the VWAP, for example, here, we can start arguing that that's a very, very nice looking short sell fade. Because if it goes above the VWAP, of course, the color of the candle would change. So I don't need the candle colors to even appear either. I don't need that, do I? I don't need the candle colors to appear. All I need is to know what it is I'm actually looking at in the first place. So there's going to be a fade trade there as well. And obviously, therefore, by looking at those things, I can then go back to the RGL setup and I can start looking to, and you can see that that's exactly where that blue candle came in for the fade. It's exactly where the blue candle came in for the fade, below the RGL. And that's exactly where the blue candle came in for the fade there, below the RGL, because you know that a moving average is always going to be faster than the VWAP moving average, right? The VWAP's always going to be slower moving than a moving average. So that's why this gives us a few more trades by using a normal moving average instead of the VWAP, but it's very accurate, very close to the same storyline. But can you see that it's the same trades at the same prices that you would have taken if you had the indicator, if you didn't have the indicator? The indicator just helps us a little bit by defining what we want to know as a trade area, doesn't it? Does that make sense? It just helps us, because at the end of the day, the RGL is a single price. Realistically, it's a single price. You don't get several settlements. You get a single price settlement. You get a single price settlement from the cash close. So if I'm looking for the US cash close, it is a single price. The CME will give you that settlement price. And that's the price, if you wanted to use a single price point, you can use that single price point. But I like to be a little bit more flexible. I like to have a few more driving forces, because we know that the market doesn't stay as one driving force for 24 hours. Sometimes it does. But we just acknowledge that there's another driving force, and that is the London Open. So this is obviously red below the London Open as well. So it's red below the US close. It's now red below the London Open. And the next RGL is going to be the cash market open in 3 minutes. So a new RGL is going to form with new drivers, new stories. And we want to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that if that market goes bullish, it doesn't really matter. In other words, if we take it simply as red, we can't go buy side until the price goes basically above here, can we? Well, that seems to be missing out on a massive upside opportunity to get to that price, which is why we bring in a new RGL, which is the US cash market open, to see if we're going to get a different storyline forming, right? So RGLs are very, very important, but at the end of the day, they are whatever you want them to be, right? They don't have any other relevance. They don't have any other relevance. So I use the market ignition orders. I use the London Open. And by doing the market and ignition orders, and then I add in the London Open here, it doesn't have to be that size of box. It can be simply so long as it includes 8 o'clock. It doesn't matter what size of box you use, so long as it includes 8 o'clock. So I could change it from 7 to 7:30 and make the box smaller. I just include 7 o'clock because it's the pre-market for London. So I include 7 o'clock and I take it up to 8:15 because I like to get the initial balance into play as well. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the RGL is still only a single price. And that single price is that blue line. It's 8 o'clock on the dot. That's the London Open price. There is no several price areas. It's a single price.